With the rise of social media, location-based apps, and e-commerce, advertisers have access to highly detailed digital footprints of private citizens. This explainer explores the delicate balance advertising entities must maintain, capitalizing on targeted marketing while strictly protecting consumer privacy and managing the entire data lifecycle from collection to destruction. Okay, let's dive into this digital dilemma. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to cover 1, the digital footprint dilemma, 2, standardizing ethical advertising, 3, the data privacy balance, 4, ensuring advertising integrity, and finally, 5, fostering workforce diversity. Let's jump right into Section 2, standardizing ethical advertising. So to truly understand this digital footprint dilemma, we have to look behind the scenes at how the industry actually measures corporate accountability. Think of the SASB standards, which are now maintained by the International Sustainability Standards Board, kind of like a strict nutritional label, but for corporate behavior. It essentially forces these massive advertising agencies to use a standardized, common language to report on their sustainability-related risks and opportunities. It creates a universal baseline so that investors and the public can evaluate how responsibly these giant global holding companies, the ones handling everything from graphic arts to intense data analytics, are actually operating. So the crucial point is how they handle all this information, bringing us to Section 3, the data privacy balance. There is this massive, inescapable core tension built right into the advertising industry. On one hand, agencies have huge financial incentives to collect and use vast quantities of data. Why? Because it lets them precisely target potential buyers. But on the other side of the scale, they're explicitly required to balance those financial benefits against the protection of customer data. It's a real tightrope walk. In short, your personal data is absolutely their profit engine, but they are closely watched to ensure they don't abuse it. And to manage this, they literally have to break down exactly what kind of data they're pulling to build what the standard calls custom audiences. So let's break down exactly what kind of data that entails. The foundation of this targeted tracking almost always starts with demographic data. This is the basic information that categorizes populations. The standards require companies to report on how they use basic identifiers. We're talking things like gender, age, ethnicity, language, and even homeownership or employment status. It's basically the starting line for forming a consumer profile. Essentially, it's putting you into a neat, marketable box. Let's move to and see how this builds, because beyond just who you are, there is behavioral data. And this represents a much, much deeper layer of your digital footprint. Advertising entities are looking at and must be accountable for how they track individual behaviors. So we're talking about online browsing patterns, buying habits, what brands you prefer. This is the moment where targeted advertising stops being broad and starts getting highly specific to your personal actions online. And then we have the final major data type, which is location data. Honestly, this is a fascinating and highly sensitive metric. It describes the physical location or movement patterns of an individual. We're talking exact GPS coordinates here. This isn't just about what you click on a website anymore. It's the literal, physical tracking of private citizens out in the real world. When you combine demographic, behavioral, and location data together, you end up with an incredibly potent tool for targeted marketing. Now, because these custom audiences are so incredibly valuable, entities are explicitly required by the SASB metric to disclose the percentage of their online advertising impressions that are targeted to these specific custom audiences. This single metric is a big deal. It reveals exactly how heavily an agency relies on harvesting personal data versus just using traditional, non-targeted methods, like contextual ads. But look, just identifying the data isn't enough. The standard requires detailed reporting on the entire information lifecycle. Companies have to disclose their information handling practices across these 4 specific stages, because a slip-up at any point affects an individual's privacy. First up, collection. Do they actually require your opt-in consent? Second, use. Are they sharing or selling this data to third parties? Third, retention. How long are they keeping it around, and is it stored securely while they have it? And finally, destruction. They even have to report if they use privacy impact assessments to evaluate the risks of handling all this electronic information in the first place. So what happens if they fail to manage this lifecycle properly? Well, here is the financial accountability aspect. Companies must publicly disclose the total amount of monetary losses incurred from any legal proceedings associated with consumer privacy incidents. We're talking settlements, regulatory penalties, civil judgments, the whole shebang. And the kicker? They can't just bury this in a bunch of confusing legalese.
They have to publicly describe the breach and detail exactly how they cleaned up their mess.
All right, let's shift from data collection to the actual content of the ads. Section 4, ensuring advertising integrity. Advertising entities have a strict legal responsibility to ensure their campaigns are not deceptive. To manage this, they participate in self-regulatory assessment procedures. Basically, companies must disclose the percentage of their campaigns that were reviewed against very strict adherence criteria. This means they have to prove their ads aren't just strictly legal, but also decent, honest, truthful, socially responsible, and completely free from discrimination. It's essentially a self-regulatory checklist to make absolutely sure campaigns don't violate cultural norms or step on privacy rights.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the standard isolates specific, highly regulated industries. There is a very specific metric requiring advertising entities to disclose exactly how much of their revenue comes from campaigns promoting alcohol or tobacco products. Why? Because these products carry heavy regulatory compliance burdens. Think media restrictions and strict warning labels. So investors and watchdogs need to know exactly how exposed an advertising agency is to these specific high-risk markets. Which brings us to the final internal metric. Section 5, fostering workforce diversity.
So far, we've talked about data and we've talked about ad content. But what about the internal metrics of the entities that are creating these massive global campaigns? The standard specifically highlights this quote: connecting with a target market relies to a significant extent on employing a workforce that reflects the communities in that market. In the advertising industry, having a diverse workforce isn't just viewed as an ethical mandate anymore. It is actually categorized as a critical factor in producing innovative ideas, improving service outcomes, and ultimately enhancing the entity's overall financial performance. And this brilliantly illustrates how seriously it's tracked. Agencies are held strictly accountable for this diversity. They must transparently format and disclose their gender and diversity group representation across 4 strict tiers of employment. That goes from executive management all the way down to all other employees. They literally have to detail their policies for maintaining equitable hiring, promotion, and wage practices across their entire global operations. Tying it all together, let's look at the future of accountability. When we pull data privacy, advertising integrity, and workforce diversity together, it leaves us with an essential question as digital marketing continues to evolve at warp speed. We know the standards require all this transparency, but are these reporting metrics enough to actually keep advertising entities in check? Can standardized corporate reporting truly balance the massive drive for profit with the vital protection of consumer rights in our modern digital age? It's definitely something to think about the next time you scroll past an ad that seems just a little bit too perfectly tailored to you.